Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, as you know, this whole month we have been talking about discernment, making a good, qualified choice of what you're putting back into your life, especially right now. It's back to school time. Everything feels fresh and new and different. And this is a topic that I think fits so nicely into the broader range of discernment, distilling down what's most important. And that is, I'd like to simplify how to adopt a healthy mindset. So my special guest today, her name is Tox Aroture, and she is a mindset strategist, a storyteller, and also the owner of a luxury brand called The Baby Cot Shop in Chelsea, London. She believes that the most valuable tools for exponential growth are the gifts each person carries deep inside them now. However, their limiting beliefs often envelop them, making access to exceptional abilities difficult. She's got a podcast called Living Inside Out with Tox, and she helps women unwrap their gifts so that they can play bigger. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Tox Aroture. Hey, Tox.
Hey, Mary. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I used to live in England. I love talking to my friends overseas, and I'm so pleased to introduce you to our audience today as well.
Oh, well, we would welcome you back anytime, Mary.
Though I don't want the weather. Let's be real. I'm in Texas where it's sunny and shiny and probably about 40 degrees Celsius right now. So it's stupidly hot.
Oh, my goodness. I'm so jealous.
But I would really love to go deep with you today. It's funny. We are in season 5 of the Simplifiers podcast, and it doesn't matter what topic someone comes on and simplifies. It always comes back down to mindset every single time, every single conversation. Why do you think that's so important in order to have a thriving life?
Listen, the mind is the engine room of our lives. It is in the mind that everything happens.
Yes.
Every decision we make, every action we take, first of all, happened in the mind before it became reality. And so that doesn't surprise me at all. That mindset seems to be at the core of a lot of the conversations that you've been having.
Mm-hmm. And why is it then, at the beginning of the new year, and especially like right now when, a lot of Americans that are listening right now, their kids are going back to school. It seems like a particularly wonderful time to refresh your mindset. Why is that?
I think it's because we have been enjoying the holiday. It's been summer. It's lovely and hot. Not always the case here in London,
sure.
But it's lovely. It's hot. We've had a break. We've had a break from life as we've been doing it for the last one academic year.
Yeah.
And as we're going back into kids going back to school, it represents a time of newness for us, and it represents, you're going shopping for, all of the bits and pieces that you use in England. We buy uniforms and you've got the stationery and everything, and everything's new. It's a new class year for an academic year for your child. Yeah. And we've had enough time to reflect on how we have been doing life and what we want to do differently when the opportunity for newness comes in. And so this season, start of a new academic year, is a barrier, if you like, or a border between the old and the new. It's like opening the door into a new year.
Yeah.
And then we start to think about what we want to do differently. But you see, many people focus on activity and what I'm going to do differently. But you cannot do differently if you don't think differently, you see. And so mindset comes into play. This is when really, rather than focusing so much on activity, you want to turn the attention back inward, not around you, and begin to think differently and start to address the negative mindsets that you have and the habitual thinking that haven't worked for you in the past, this is the time to begin to work on the mind more than ever.
And that reminds me of a conversation that I had not too long ago with the brain guy, Scott Robinson, down in Australia.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was fascinating to learn more about really what's going on in the brain. Like the subconscious runs 80-90% of all of your decisions, and you don't even know it's an autopilot a lot of times, right?
Absolutely. That's the case. And, my son came down this morning and he said to me, I came down for something and I forgot. I forgot what it was. And we were talking about how thoughts are like little people that have a mind of their own, and then they're constantly running. And so if you don't hold on to it tightly, it might just literally disappear. And that's what happened. And I agree.
Yeah.
The mind is so powerful, constantly going, like you said, never stopping, even when we're sleeping. I joke to my friends and I say, I run my business even in my sleep.
And I think in our sleep, a lot of times we're processing big emotions and things and like processing our day previous in such a way just to kind of, push through and distill down what did we learn and how are we going to recover, especially if it was a tough day as well, right?
Absolutely. We do that. And, that's even one of the easiest way to solve a problem that you can solve. If you've got a challenge that you've been facing, a situation that you're in, you can't seem to make sense of, is just go to sleep. Because while you're sleeping, your brain actually does work to figure out a solution.
Yeah. And so I think what I've learned from Scott, and I hope that we talk about today, is, a lot of times you have to kind of scoop out some of these negative or limiting beliefs that you have in your mind, right? Of like, I am, like they're really linked towards identity. That's am this, I am not this. And that's what either, keeps you safe or, if you start to scoop that stuff out, then we can play big, as you say. But before we go there, I want to really dive a little bit deeper. So you said like everything that happens in your life is directly related to your mindset. Will you tell me more there?
So if you think about, I like to think about or explain that using an illustration. If you think about a fruit, for example, it's got the outer layer, which is the part that we see. And then it's got the flesh, which is the part we eat. And then it's got the seed all the way on the inside. I see it as man is made up of spirit, soul, and body. The seed is your spirit. The flesh that you eat is the mind. And the skin on the outside is the body. You need to understand that everything that we see on the outside is a reflection of what's already on the inside. We wouldn't have an avocado fruit. We wouldn't recognize an avocado if it wasn't an avocado on the outside. It's what it's made up of on the inside. It's the flesh that we eat. That's what makes it an avocado. But the appearance of it is just the skin. And so you cannot possibly make any decisions in life without it, first of all, occurring to you to make it. I went through a journey years ago when I was using the services of a mentor, brilliant mentor. And after about close to a year of working with him, I mean, I'm in retail, he's in retail. He's a very successful former CEO of some household brands. And I couldn't quite understand why having the best of the best was not making a difference to my business. There was no difference in the outcome because I had assumed that my association with someone like him, and of course, gaining his knowledge and his experience would make a difference to my business. And then one day, out of frustration, I sat down and I said, okay, Tokes, let's talk. What's going on in your mind? Because I know that the mind is where it all happens.
Yes.
And I journal, as that my journal is my therapist.
Yes.
So I journal and I start writing, and I uncover through my writing that every time I was with him, there was this feeling of inadequacy and smallness that came out of comparing my business journey with his business journey. Now, his journey is vast, and he has years on me biologically, in experience, in business, in life experiences, in everything.
Yeah.
And I was still quite a fledgling business at the time, and there was very little I knew, which is why I needed the services of a mentor in the first place. But then I found that I was feeling small, and I was running this comparison game whenever I was with him, and I felt totally eclipsed by him. And then my reaction, so this is where I say what goes on in your mind creates the action that you take. So that thought and that belief and that mindset drove me to counteract the feeling I was having of smallness by talking about all of my wins. And I would say to him, when we had our monthly meetings, I'd say, oh, I had this celebrity the other day, and we had this amazing order, and I did this and I did that. And all I did was talk about how great I was. I didn't talk about my weaknesses because I was embarrassed about them. I didn't talk about my challenges because I felt I was supposed to be more like him. And why should I have challenges if he's not having challenges? It was a warped way of thinking, but it was born out of a mindset of a feeling of inadequacy. And it therefore drove my behavior and it drove my actions. And of course, if I'm going for mentoring and having these meetings and I'm saying how awesome I am, well, he doesn't have anything to teach me, does he? Yeah. And so that's just one example of how a healthy mindset is so essential and how our mindsets can drive the trajectory of our lives.
And so what I hear in what you shared there, and I think so many people listening right now, raise your hand if this is you, can resonate with that. The social landscape of social media itself is, ripe with comparison of putting story behind that person is way more successful than I am, and they've been doing it for less time, and gosh, that's just not fair, right? I should probably just quit now because ... right? But then what I also hear in your story there is authenticity is important. That if you can show and express both the good and the not so good, the challenges, then you're showing your whole self with your mentors. You might not show your whole self with your customers, right? There's a place and a time to show vulnerabilities of sorts, but maybe you do in some of your social media, because I think social media alone is very filtered and slick and polished, and everything's just got a veneer of perfectionism that isn't quite real, right?
That's right. That's absolutely true. And that's the thing is, we have that responsibility to curate our space and our environment.
Yes.
And like you said, authenticity is really the backbone, or if you like, the foundation of everything. Because for one, if you cannot be authentic and open with yourself, you will not even recognize flaws when they show up and slap you. You're not even going to know that you're failing in an area, or a particular habit or a mindset is failing you. And so we have a responsibility to know what our weaknesses are. And I don't believe in pulling ourselves down for the sake of a flaw that we have.
Right.
But I believe in embracing the whole human, like you say, because that's who we are.
Yeah.
But you recognize your weaknesses and your tendencies, and you work on them. And by working on them, it's not necessarily trying to reverse them. But if you understand the why of why you think the way you think, or why you feel the way you feel. I see another woman running her business and I begin to compare myself habitually with her, and it affects me. Yeah. I need to deep dive and uncover why her success makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
Why can I not be happy with where I'm at? What am I interpreting her success to be? What does it mean to me? It doesn't matter what it means to you or to the rest of the world, but what does it mean to me? When I see another woman doing well in her business, even if she's in the same field as me, why am I interpreting it as I am failing and she is successful.
Yeah.
And then when you find out what that is, then you now have to, that's what I call a lie, because there are many lies that we believe. I have an episode called Lies We Believe and the Truth That Sets Us Free. There are many lies that we believe. And so you identify the lies and you inform yourself of the truth, which is she has a different path from you. You have an audience that is allocated to you and to your business. And she has her way of doing things and you have your way of doing things. And I cannot tell you how that practice has been such a joy to me. I mean, there was a woman that I would avoid having conversations with because I felt a bit threatened by her business and the way that she ran her business. And it wasn't until I had that conversation with myself and I came to understand that we're all unique. We're all incredibly gifted. We are all unrepeatable miracles, that her path is different from mine. And I needed to embrace mine and be thankful for what I had and just grow in that space.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of wisdom and truth in that, because we waste and expend so much energy in comparison and feeling not enoughness. That insecurity flares up. If that's what's top of mind, then that's going to affect your choices that you make today, the behaviors you make today. Let's say you're writing up a big proposal for a big luxury client. You're like, oh, I don't feel like I deserve that extra zero on the end of that sales invoice or whatever. So you kind of discount, or you kind of, tiptoe in with less confidence. And guess what? When you tiptoe in with less confidence, you're less likely to get the sale. So it's a ripple effect. It just, the snowball gets bigger down the mountain, right?
It really does. And another thing that can come out of that is, and a typical example is, like you said, writing a big proposal for a client. And then I start to compare myself with another company that the client potentially could have gone with.
Yeah.
And the danger is I begin to ignore my own creativity and my own gift that puts my stamp and my signature on it.
Yes.
And I start to think, I'm sure that they would want them to have done it. And therefore, I'm going to do it a little bit like the way they would have done it. And then I start, compromising on how I run things and compromising on my own natural gift. And I believe that our gifts are, everyone is unique. Just look at your fingerprints, Everyone's unique. There are no two versions of either any of us, regardless of the trillions of people that have ever existed on Earth and will ever exist. Yeah. And so for that reason, it means that whatever your business is in, whatever your craft is, or the service that you offer, no human being on earth could possibly do the same thing. On the outside, it might look like it's the same, but in the flesh where it matters, the inner side of you, the inner part of it, it's not the same. And there is something you're offering that no one else can.
And, I really hope that just one person just heard what you said and really took it to heart, because I think if we all just believed that deep to our core, the idea of comparison is so silly, right? Because if that's the truth, which it is, then there is no reason to compare, apples to apples, because the apples are completely different.
Completely different, right? Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about other hindrances and roadblocks that keep us from having a healthy mindset, not only as a business owner, but just as a human out there in the world. You and I talked offline, and you had mentioned that some things that hold people back are like societal expectations or how you were raised. And bottom line, if you peel back the onion far enough, it's fear, right?
That's right.
Tell me more.
So that it's absolutely true. There is so much that hold us back. And I believe that if you think about your gift being the seed, the core of who you are, and it's in its purest form. It's flawless. It's absolutely perfect. Yes, in real life, we do need to work on our skills, and we need to get some education and polish things and learn how to do things properly. But in its purest form, it is flawless.
Yeah.
Now, that seed has got to grow through you to be revealed to the world. It's like a seed that's buried in the soil. It's got to grow through you to be revealed in the world. But then when you have things like societal expectations, the tendency to compare, like we mentioned, self-esteem issues, the words that were said to you as a child that were damaging, poor upbringing as a child, trauma, all of those things, each of them forms a layer over that seed. And that seed is going to have to break through each of those layers before it can even be revealed to the world. And so it shows the importance of working on our hindrances. There is a saying that talks about it's their safety in numbers. And many of us want to live our lives in a way that is acceptable by most of society. And so sometimes that means we are constantly amending and altering our shape so we can fit in. And by doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not allowing your gift to grow.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and then there's words that you've heard growing up. Even if the words were not necessarily negative, if they don't describe who you are and they don't agree with you, and they don't describe the gifts that you've been given, then the chances are you're going to carry on growing up trying to find who you are. You know, you're going to keep working on discovering yourself. And then there is also a more bringing it closer to home is toxic relationships. Toxic relationships, you know, a lot of times friendships that are toxic don't even look toxic. And I'll give an example. I used to have a friend who we were really, really good friends, and she is not a bad person, and she's not even a toxic person. There's, you know, many ways very little wrong with her. But then I had to pull away from the relationship because I noticed my tendency to be so reliant on her views that I wasn't using my gift. And so that friendship was toxic, not necessarily the person, but the friendship itself was toxic. There are some friendships and relationships that don't do well when it comes to elevating or even being in business. Having a people pleaser, I'm a recovered people pleaser, having a people pleaser with another person who has a more dominant personality can be damaging, even though the person with the dominant personality, even though they're both great people. So you've got to recognize what it is that might be holding you back. For some people, and this is why I talk a lot about introspection. Through introspection, you'll find out what works for you. You find out more about yourself. You learn about your weaknesses, and you embrace it. But you need to know that it's there, and you need to know what your tendencies are. Because when you do, then you can recognize from a distance anything that's coming close to you that's going to topple you on your journey. So there's so many hindrances, both external and from within as well.
Yeah, and you know, obviously there are different modalities to unpack this stuff. But one of the things that you had said earlier is that you do a lot of journaling. Is there any sort of journal prompts or places to begin? Like if somebody was listening to you and I right now, they go, okay, I'm going to open up a piece of paper in my journal and I'm going to set a 7-minute timer. What would be the first question you'd want them to ask themselves and start writing out?
What's on my mind? What's on my mind? And that is, I do that so often, and particularly when I'm going through a challenging season. If I'm discouraged or I'm bothered or I'm restless or uncertain, I just grab my journal and I write what's on my mind. And you do literally a brain dump of everything on your mind. And the reason you want to do that is because there are situations that your mind has created off the back of something else. And let's say you list 20 different challenges that you're facing or you think you're facing. When you look at them, first of all, they look less powerful when you're looking at them on paper. They don't look like the monsters that have been created in your head. But more importantly, you start to notice that out of the 20, perhaps 5 of them are actually exactly the same thing, but they have just morphed themselves and presented themselves differently. Then you find another 5 are actually assumptions. They're not even real. They're just things that you have assumed and you fear will happen. And then you're left with, let's say you're left with 5 or you're left with 2, you find that, okay, 2 of them, whatever's left are potentials that could happen because you can see the signs. Assumptions, no signs whatsoever. It's all happening in the mind. Mm-hmm. Potentials, you can see the signs. It could happen. But is it happening now? No. Yeah. What can I then do to mitigate any challenges that may crop up because of this? And sometimes what I do as well, and what I'd recommend, is draw a line. Just even if you don't journal, grab a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and you now separate your list of worries. One side says assumptions, the other side says reality. And if, let's use money for example, I'm worried that I can't pay my staff at the end of the month because business has been slow this month. And the fear I have is I won't be able to pay them. So that's an assumption. But the reality is we're not at the end of the month and I don't owe anybody money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you'll find that a lot of times we are fearful of things that are yet to happen. And journaling is one way to expose the fear and show its butt out that there is no power in it.
Mm-hmm. And diffuse it. Yeah. I think that's such a brilliant way to say it. And, I think for me, I do a lot of journaling as well. But I take it even one step further that when I walk my dog in the morning, I pray out loud. And that's just a way for me to get it up and out of me. And I think that there's something powerful about saying your fears or your insecurities or the things that are challenging you and with your outside voice and getting it up and out of you. It's so it doesn't swirl in your head constantly. And I think also when you write it down and you actually see it for what it is, then you go, oh, well, actually, it's not that big, or it's not that urgent. It's a thing that I'm projecting that's going to happen. Maybe not in the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever. But I'm really getting myself worked up over it right now in the present.
Exactly.
Do you think there's some truth to that? Like getting the words up and out of you, either vocally or in written form, that's part of the magic here, right?
I think there is so much truth in that. And currently I'm actually learning a lesson. I call them buzzwords, because when I find I'm in a season where I'm facing the same words or the same phrases wherever I go, it means it's a lesson that God is teaching me. And I'm learning that the unseen, let's call the thing, the ideas and the plans and the imaginations and our dreams as the unseen. And the seen is when it has happened. For the unseen to become seen, it needs to be transformed into its physical version. And so when you have an imagined fear and you say it out loud and you speak what you want to see instead happen in your life, you're giving, like you said, you're exposing what it is, but you're giving life to the truth. You're bringing the truth to life, and you're bringing what you want to happen to life. So absolutely, I agree that there is so much power in taking what's on the inside and bringing it out, both where it's negative and where it's positive, because you don't want the negative to sit down and fester and become something else. And you don't want the positive to remain as an intention that you never actually carry out. So action is so essential, and action through activity or voice turns the unseen brings it into the world, makes it physical.
Totally. And, to amp it up even 10 times more than that, tell someone, share it with someone, right? Whether it's a mentor or a coworker or a trusted friend or advisor. Absolutely. When you also share it out and they go, hang on, Mary, hang on, Tox. Like, why are you getting so worked up over that? It's a very simple solution. Or have you thought of this? Or, just to help to kind of hold a mirror up to you and say, like, you do know how awesome you are, right? Like, why are you stressing about this thing? And then you go, oh, okay. And it diffuses it, right?
It really does. It's that thing they say if you have a spot on your hand and you hold it at a distance, you see a spot. But when you bring it up close to you, it's a lot larger than that. But then a friend can help you see you from a distance, and then they tell you what they see. I see an awesome woman.
Yeah.
I see a fearless woman. And then they remind you of the things that the fear has caused you to forget.
Yes. And when you're in that fear state, at least I can only speak for myself, that's when my insecurities rise up. And I go, I don't really know what I'm doing. Or, what if they reject me? Or, all of that scary stuff kind of rises up. But,
Indeed.
It is helpful to go back to the truth, to the truth. So I want to talk about more of the how. You talk a lot in your work about playing big in life and unwrapping your gifts. So talk to us about some practical ways that we can A, play big, and B, unwrap our gifts.
So the first thing I would recommend is doing the personality test. We all kind of grow up assuming we know ourselves and and a lot of times one of my least favorite phrases is, I know myself, I would hate that, or I know myself, I can't do that. The reason why I don't like that phrase is because you can never fully know yourself because you're constantly evolving. But even without the evolution, who you are today, it's necessary to know who you are. And what a personality test does, it doesn't inform you of who you are. It more likely confirms what you always knew about yourself, but because you didn't get anyone telling you that you were this gifted or you're this person or you're like that, you didn't quite believe it. Yeah. There's gifts in us that I remember doing the Enneagram test, and one of the phrases, one of my traits is that I have an indomitable spirit. And I kind of always knew that, but I didn't really know that because I just had never faced that fact before. But seeing it written down on paper and reading up on the word and what it meant, I thought, this really describes me. And so it helps you to embrace all of you. And it helps to expose the gifts that you didn't even know you had, or you had, but you were in denial. Or perhaps you have a calling on your life that is not particularly attractive, because it's not pretty, it's not on social media, and you're not looking all glam and everything.
Right.
Maybe that's the case. And a personality test would confirm to you that actually this is something that you were created to do. This is not some random thoughts that keeps popping up in your head. Yeah.
It's such a great tip, and if, by the way, everything that we talk about on today's episode, you can find in the show notes over at thesimplifierspodcast.com. But yes, the Enneagram is fascinating. There are 9 different personality types with different wings and all things. And it truly is fascinating to take some quizzes and see which you lean more towards. But, I would also say the Myers-Briggs test is excellent. The Strengths Finder test is excellent. That are kind of different, again, modalities to help you get clear on who you are. Like, it builds the foundation first. But then I also imagine that you're, like you say, to your point, you've evolved, you've grown, you've changed, you've learned things. You've probably dropped some old negative limiting beliefs at some point and picked up some new stuff along the way. So don't just assume that if you took one of these tests 10, 15, 20 years ago, that it's going to be the same now, right?
That's right. Absolutely. We're constantly evolving. And I love the strengths test, the VIA strengths test. And I did that years ago, and my top 5 strengths changed. Like you said. Yeah, it did change. And one of the things I learned about that, which was so interesting, I just did the test. I'm like, okay, these are my top 5 strengths. Yeah. And one of my top strengths is the appreciation of beauty and excellence. And I just kind of thought, oh, okay, it's true. I do love beautiful things, and I love people. I love watching people in their craft. I love going to concerts. I love seeing musicians with their instruments, and I love artists. And it just blows my mind when I see talent. And so I knew that I felt that way, but I didn't know it was a strength. It was a strength. But then to take it further, was I did not know that your strengths actually help you when you're struggling. And that I only discovered that I think it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That when I'm feeling restless and when I'm feeling confused or uncertain or tired or discouraged, I can go and grab one of my strengths and just revel in it.
Yeah.
And it pulls me right back up. And
And
that's another way.
Yeah. And that makes me think, I mean, just as you said that, like if you were having a super overwhelmed day, I bet if you went to a museum or,
Yeah.
looked and just experienced a live music show, we get so serious. Like when we're really stressed out at work and we're like overwhelmed and we're like, I just need to put more hours into it. If I just stay up late tonight, actually the better solution may be to get a good night's rest. Take the next morning, go and take a stroll at a museum, even if it's for 30 minutes. And you're opening up those different neural pathways in your brain to, I don't know, calm the nervous system, right? And go, oh, I'm getting inspiration. This is helping me move past this block, right?
Indeed. And you find that it blesses other areas of your life,
Yes.
And like you said, we tend to have a linear way of thinking. So I'm overwhelmed and I have all this work to do, and therefore my solution will be do more work.
Right. Very rarely works.
Yeah, it very rarely works. No, it doesn't work. And we need to understand that we are so complex and so dynamic as humans that you cannot possibly find, 1 + 1 does not equal 2 with us humans, put it that way. Yeah. And so knowing your strengths are important, knowing your personality is important. And these things really do help you play big and show up better in your business or in life. It really does help. It makes all of the difference, because there is only so much you can do humanly as a human being. There is only so much strength you have. There's only 24 hours in a day. There is no way we can cut and dice it. It's never going to be more than 24 hours. And no way that you can change the amount of strength that you have. And even if you went to the gym and you pumped weights and you became so much stronger, well, guess what? Your mental space is also limited. Yeah. There's only so much we can do. And so taking action in all of these areas that may seem unrelated actually elevates and magnifies your abilities in ways that you wouldn't have thought it was possible.
So great. Tox, I could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately we need to wrap up. And if you are curious about the work that she does out in the world, there are 2 places I'm going to send you. One, she has this incredible luxury baby furniture shop in Chelsea, in London, that is phenomenal. It's called thebabycotshop.com. That's the website where you can find it. And you're offering our listeners a free 1-hour consultation, correct? Is that for...
That's correct, yeah.
And so...
business, yeah.
For the business side. But also, you also have this 3-month program called Finish Strong, Your Foundation, for starting next year well. So you're offering our listeners a 20% discount using the code SIMPLE as well.
That's right. Because can I just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course.
It's coming up to the end of the year. Yes, it feels like the middle. We're still in August, but it's coming up to the end of the year slowly. Yeah. And this is when people begin to wind down. This is when we're looking forward to the holidays and we're looking forward to the end of the year. And that's all well and good. But what we want to do is start next year strong. Yes. And how you finish can have a tremendous effect on how you start the following year. And so it's a really good program, and I'm very excited to run it.
Brilliant. And so the other website is, in fact, your name, toxarotue.com. Again, all the links are in the show notes, and that's where you can find it at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So you can see the business consultation that you do and all the work out there in the world. So, Tox, as we wrap up, there's a few questions I'd like to ask you that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. And thank you for sharing your beautiful brain and your wisdom today. So tell me, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
It's got to be My Mother's Rules by Lynn Toler. Now, Lynn Toler is used to be the she's a High Court George. I'm not sure she's High Court, but she's a High Court George, and used to run or star in the Divorce Court, which is a TV show in the United States. And but she's a woman of extreme wisdom, like literally extreme wisdom. And My Mother's Rules is a book that I would say is one on emotional intelligence and mindset, and her mom taught her how to think. Yeah. Her father she was raised in a chaotic household, very successful father, loving father, mom and dad, both successful. But then he had bipolar and wasn't well diagnosed. And so despite that, he was a very successful lawyer. But then there was a lot that went on in the house that destabilized her as a person. And her mom, according to her, saw that she was leaning towards that spectrum as well, and taught her how to handle her thoughts and the thoughts that were driving her around the bend. This is how you handle it. This is how to think. This is how to observe the world. And such a powerful, powerful book. So I'm loving that book at the moment.
It's brilliant. I've not actually read that one. So we will link that up in the show notes. If you guys are curious about it, you can find it there. Again, thesimplifierspodcast.com. So tell me, who's one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
I've got to say, my dear friend Detola Amure, she is a grief counselor and taught me that grief is something that occurs not just when it comes to losing a loved one. People grieve the loss of their jobs, they grieve the loss of a spouse or divorce, loss of a marriage, and just so many different situations. And her story was born out of her also losing her son, her young son. And the way she evolved out of that is just fascinating to watch. And now she helps other people who are going through some type of grief or the other. She helps them. That's what she does now for a living. So she's someone I definitely would love to shine a light on.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, we will link her up in the show notes. If you guys are curious about her work, you can find her there as well. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to use my voice. I'm grateful that my experience of my business journey, my life has served as a classroom to so many people. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to be on the Simplified podcast.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you here as well. And, I think the truth is that we all as business owners have had, some rocky times, some quote unquote failures and flounders. But that's part of our unique story, our unique journey. We learn so much from the dips as well as the peaks, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Absolutely.
So all of Tox's social media channels are in the show notes if you guys want to connect with them direct. But is there one place where you hang out the most, maybe Instagram or YouTube?
Yes, I'm on Instagram and it's at Tox Arotire, my first name and surname, no spaces or dashes. And also on YouTube, we've got a YouTube channel, which is also Tox Arotire. So I can be found in any of those places. And of course, on my podcast, which is on every major podcast platform.
Perfect. And so my final question for you today is this. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now. And, there's something in there that was a little spark. It just lit that little spark in their heart and in their mind of like, maybe life could be just a 1% better, 1% different. But it's a little bit scary to say that out loud. What's one thing you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
The world will be darker without you using your gift and being you. Show up as your full self. And your presence as a full person will actually be a blessing to so many people who see you.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.